right, welcome back to another podcast. Today I have Pam Fender with me. Pam is a realtor in North and South Carolina and has extensive experience in the real estate business. So, Pam, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been actually wanting to have you on for a while and to talk to you about your life story as well as the real estate industry, business, and so on. Usually with these type of interviews or podcasts, what I do is I ask the guest about their story and like who are they today, who were they like way back in high school as well. So maybe we can start like going way back.
High school, wow. So this year I'll be celebrating my 50th birthday party. So I'm not even sure if I remember high school or not. But as you know, we're both originally from Rochester, New York, and I went to Spenceport High School. Obviously, you guys can know the year based on what I just told you. But when you were kind of speaking about the podcast and your audience and stuff, I knew what I wanted to do coming out of high school. It wasn't, it wasn't realtor per se. It was just I knew I wanted to be in business. I knew I wanted to be not even just self-employed, but I knew that I wanted to be in the business field.
Okay.
Everything business really just got me passionate about it. It's kind of funny because even the vision that I had was, a small little house, a little picket fence, and just really making a difference in the world in business. And that was my thought. And as you move forward, I think that there's a path that's always been created for you based on things. And I got to do a lot of things. Most people probably at my age probably don't get to be in so many different fields.
Mm-hmm.
I was in telecommunications. I was an IT person. And I didn't have a degree in IT, but, I worked with computers since the age of 7. So I definitely am one of those ones who had the Texas Instrument. And would actually program my own games.
Wow.
At the age of 7, and back then it was just you type in 100, you put the code in, and and you get your games. So for me, I think trying to figure out what I truly wanted to do was exploring all those different avenues, and not everybody has those opportunities because a lot of times their college or their careers really put them into a specialty that doesn't give them to explore all the other pieces.
So back like in high school, you said you were sure you wanted to be in business and so on. But what were some people or things that influenced you into wanting to pursue business?
Well, I mean, my family owned a music store probably in the 50s, and the jukeboxes, pinball machines, things like that. And and I saw how hard they worked. I think growing up in Rochester, it was you worked for Kodak, right? I mean, everybody worked for Kodak, or Paychecks kind of came around at the time, or Wegmans, and so nobody knew what you did at Kodak. If you worked for Kodak, nobody asked any more questions, right? You worked for Kodak.
Yeah.
So I think back at that point when I started looking at what interested me, none of the classes in school, even though I did 7 years of French, interest me. Anything that had to do with business law, we had accounting classes. We even had some computer classes. We actually took a keyboarding class.
You can bring that microphone over a little bit.
Okay.
Like if you're facing that way, the camera's here anyway.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So for myself, I think it was just the fact that I wanted to be control of my own destiny. And I don't feel like in any of those other careers I would have had those opportunities. So
it was more because your family owned, or like they were entrepreneurial.
I saw the difference because when you worked for Kodak, that's all you did. You worked for Kodak. There wasn't, they owned you, right? I think being self-employed, you get to choose your own destiny. And there's not a profile. There's not a profile that says, okay, well, Pam goes to Kodak and she's now in accounting, when I may want to do something else, because people back then just wanted a job. Like they wanted a job. All they cared a lot of times about was the money that they were making. And, and I feel like direction was a big key piece in high school. I actually had a lot of people in high school that were very supportive of me as a person. But at the same time, I just kind of took my own path.
Mm-hmm. So, as far as like those people who were supportive, were they like your parents, adults, or like who?
I had a huge tribe. I had some really good friends that I went all the way from junior high with, where I had people. I had my guidance counselors at the time. They've known me for over 8 years, and things like that. I had a lot of people in the churches that were nearby that I did a lot of stuff with.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that is abnormal, I'll say, about being who I am in high school is that I did a lot of charity work back then.
Okay.
So I was part of like Relay for Life, or there was a charity thing and I would be 100% into it, or any kind of charity or volunteer work I was doing, whether it was Red Cross or things like that, because in my opinion, I felt like you had to give back to the community to be a part of the community. So that got a lot of avenues for me. And I did get a really cool job at 16.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at Park Ridge Nursing Home, and you're like, well, why would that be cool? It's because I was making more money than all my friends. Because at the hospital, they pay you as if you're like a real person, right? Not a teenager, right? And so everybody else was only making like $2.95 at the restaurants and stuff, and I was making $5.48. And I only had to work 5 to 9 because the nursing home closes down after 9 o'clock. So I still had a social life and was able to work. So those people there, you learned the dedication. You met people that were in real life working, and I wasn't in a lot of teenager jobs. So I really had a lot of experience with adults.
Yeah. So volunteering, was that something that you kind of naturally out of your own will got into it, or were you like encouraged by your parents or somebody else?
I hope my parents don't see this, but my parents had no idea what I was doing. I walked to school. I did things. My parents worked a lot of hours. And the stuff that I did or I enjoyed doing, a lot of people knew that was just part of who I was. And I definitely was a very self-starter. Mm-hmm. And even at the age of 9, I started working. So I was selling birthday cards and occasion cards out there, and I was doing pretty well with it. So my first job was 12 at the church. So I mean, I was even working at the town hall at 12, cleaning the town hall. So to that point, I was very inspired not to be poor.
That was going to be my next question. Like, what was your motivation behind that? Like, what was it? Yeah,
when I was one of those kids in the 80s that parents got divorced. Things changed pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And I just thought if I worked, I would never be poor. Mm-hmm. So we went through some real hard changes in life and had to get new friends, new lives. And I just knew that money in my pocket, was kind of a saving grace. Mm-hmm. And then I also was brought up, and this was from my parents, was that you can't expect anything in life from anyone unless you're willing to do the work. So I always just made sure I did the work to, get to the future.
Yeah. So how did you resolve kind of volunteering versus working for money? Because it sounded like you were still motivated to volunteer as well, where you're not really getting anything. Because
in my opinion, and this is still my opinion today, that the world's a better place when you're out there helping others, and that it's not about what it gives you today, it's about what it builds for the future. Mm-hmm. And you can't expect to be paid today because you don't know where that kindness comes from. So if you actually think about your own mental stability in life, when you're out there giving, there is such a huge change in the demographic, in the character building of your personality, because you start to learn from other people who don't have the ability to do the things that you're doing to help them. And you just start to be very, I'm going to use the word grateful for what you do have. Because as I said, we did not have a lot when I was growing up. And I'm telling you today that I thought we were poor. I'm pretty sure my mom wouldn't tell you that. I don't think my mom or any other family member thought we were poor. But I didn't ask for things. So I didn't ask for things because I knew we didn't have the money. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of nice to help other people that are in the same boat, so that you do get that, I'm going to say that just little picture of what life could really be.
Mm-hmm. So motivation wasn't just money. Like, you wanted to help other people. I
just didn't want to be poor.
Okay. Makes sense. So, obviously, I know you a little bit. You're extroverted. You're like out there as far as social circles and engaging with people and so on. How much did that help you through your early years, like in middle school, high school, and even beyond high school?
Well, I will tell you that I think my ninth grade teacher called me a cruise director, and that all I was doing was always planning some kind of party. But I mean, I grew up as a good kid. I kept straight and narrow on a lot of stuff that I did. Definitely made mistakes on the way, but I really just felt like everybody had a story, and I felt like there was never a person that you shouldn't get to know, or a person that you shouldn't open yourself to have an engagement. So I just felt like everybody was equal. But I did have a lot of different influences early on, where I got to go to like college campuses, or, you know, through my churches and stuff. We had a big, huge network of different churches that we'd have spring flings, and I got to meet so many people. And before I went to New York, my parents divorced. I mean, I was already in the military. So I went through, I think, 7 or 8 different, I think it was probably maybe 7 different elementary schools. So you had to make friends quick. You had to build trust with people quickly, because we were moving almost every 2 years. So
your dad was in the military?
My dad was in the Air Force when they were together. Yep.
Okay. And you mentioned a couple times that they got divorced. What was life like before the divorce and after the
totally
divorce?
Different. The family dynamic was definitely very different. Obviously, before my parents were divorced, my parents were very loving parents, and did everything they could for us. And I came from a very prominent family before the divorce, and then after the divorce, even though all the family stayed together, it was a very tragic divorce, to where nobody was talking, and there had to be some drastic moves. So we moved very quickly when the divorce happened, and life changed. I mean, we got pretty much uprooted from what we knew, straight to really straight to Rochester, with not knowing anybody, and my mom being a single mom. So there was a lot of changes. You had to be mature fast. You probably can understand now. That's why I was working so early. Not that my parents ever expected me to do that, but I just knew that if I wanted extra things, I had to find the money for it.
How old were you when the divorce happened?
So my parents separated at 8. Again, my mom was a single mom. My dad was still in the military, and he wasn't around. And they weren't even in the same state to even have a relationship. So that just made you understand and appreciate the things you had. And you knew that you had to be smarter than everybody. You knew that you had to be quick-witted, and you had to be on top of things, because the only person that was kind of looking out for you was you.
So your last year, your senior year in high school, what was going through your mind as far as what you wanted to do after high school?
The senior year was a bust. I'm going to talk about a realtor. I actually get the story a lot, because people will say, we really want to move to Charlotte, but our kids are in their high school years. We're really concerned about them being a junior and senior, and losing those friendships they have and trying to make new ones. And I will tell them that there was a realtor who said the market was slow, and they suggested to my parents over my junior summer. So when I was going to go to school, it would be my senior year, and that the house was going to take probably over 6 months to sell. So they suggested, let's put it on the market now. When that happened, the house sold in a week, and I was going to a new high school. So I was in Spenceport since I was in 5th grade, and my senior year was actually at Hilton High School.
Okay.
And what is interesting about that is there were a lot of people, I told you, that were rooting for me, right? There was a lot of people at Spenceport that really was like, I'm seeing you every day driving, doing your bike everywhere. You bike everywhere. You're always watching kids. You're doing this, you're doing that. And they're like, we've never seen someone that's a go-getter like you. So the guidance counselor called me into her office once she heard that I was not going to be in Spenceport. And she said, I can promise you can graduate from Spenceport. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but my sister is having a harder time with this because she was only a ninth grader, and she had been in school since she was, third grade.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to move. So I knew that if I took them up on the offer, it would be harder on my sister. And my brother got uprooted from Spencer Schools as well. And Hilton allowed me to have the study hall the first class so I could take him to school. Because this was all kind of, again, that realtor, I tell you. So can't trust them all. But in that situation, my high school year was weird. I did make some good friends and stuff like that, but I don't even know if anybody really remembers me in Hilton because I was there for a half day. Hilton let me go to work at Park Ridge half the day. And so my senior year was pretty much, I'm going to say a bust. I just knew after that I was going to go to probably MCC for a minute just to kind of get my classes in and then truly decide on what school I wanted to go to.
Okay, so that's the next question as far as what you did next. So you did go to MCC.
Yep.
And how did you decide on that? Did you have like other people kind of guiding you through that?
No, I think it was one of those things where because there was such much transition my high school year that I felt like I wasn't really ready to go to a full 4-year school. I knew that it wanted to be business, but I mean, MCC was $1,000 compared to all the other schools. And it's like, and I will say this too. Remember I told you about the divorced parents, remember? The divorced parents, when you were doing financial aid back then, you had to take the income from your family household, not from, not because my dad was not around, by the way. We lost touch and we had no idea where he was at. So when they were doing my financial aid, I got nothing. But yet my stepfather was not responsible for paying for anything. Mm-hmm. So pretty much if I was going to go to college, I was gonna have to write the check. So for me, I thought, well, let me take the cheapest route to get at least some of my basics in first before I really truly went there. And I will say that there was a little. If you guys are in high school, don't take anything that I'm telling you right now as any kind of facts. Just I want you to know that there's a lot of mess ups in life, and you still can be successful. I think that's where I'm going with this. But my mom said I wasn't college material, so. My mom thought I should just start working. And she just thought, you just need a job. And a lot of people are like, I can't believe your mom wasn't supportive. But at that time, she probably knew more than most people. I liked working. I told you I worked for a long period of time, right? So not having money in my pocket or things like that was probably a pretty big aggregate to her response. But she told me I wasn't college material. But anytime someone tells me that I can't do something or that I'm not this, I will go through that harder path or that road that I could have taken the easy one. And I always take the path that's got the rocks and everything to prove something wrong or prove to myself who I am. And I think that those years were a big one for me because I had to identify who I was as a person, an individual, and an adult, and really understand what I wanted in life.
Mm-hmm. So you went to MCC for 2 years, and after that, what did you decide to do?
I went to Southern Wesleyan. I had some scholarships for they weren't much, but I actually Bible quizzed at 16. By the way, wasn't that great at, but I had some good friends that were, so I just kind of hung out with the friends. I went to Southern Wesleyan, and I went for a business degree. I didn't finish it. I was there for a couple of years and I didn't finish it because I got some offers from companies. And one of the companies was Curling Enterprises down in Roanoke, Virginia. It was kind of almost like an internship, but it paid really well. So I kind of took my business degree. And back then, by the way, you didn't really need a degree for everything. So a lot of times when you got your internships, you just kind of went with it. So at that point, I didn't finish my business degree.
Mm-hmm. So you went to work, and you were in Virginia, in West Virginia. So
it was in Virginia. It was actually Virginia. Yep, it was actually down out near Roanoke. Okay. They have a 12 hospital system that I was helping out and doing accounts receivable and payable.
Okay.
Yep.
How did you transition from that to IT or IT support?
So pretty much what happened was I was in business doing all that. I went to Verizon. I was in accounts receivable, accounts payable, but I've always had a computer minor. And once I worked at the, by the way, I hope people from Chase aren't listening to this either, but I actually went from Verizon to Chase. And when I went to Chase, I was one of the better producers of mortgages. And when my computer wasn't working properly, obviously I would fix it. And when I wanted a new computer, I knew how to break it. So I always had a nice computer or the top tech in Chase, and they knew I knew how to fix them. And then when I went to Frontier, they had some training classes and stuff to kind of get you into the telecommunication, networking, things like that. And some of those natural abilities just kind of came out to where I just was fixing things. So you went from being kind of telecommunications, networking stuff, and they started actually getting into the computers more. But I already knew how to do a lot of those things. So those kind of natural skills where I was pretty good at those things. And even at Frontier, my boss told me he could never complain about my work because I was making more money in the sales paying for my position, even though my position wasn't a sales position. So I was actually a technician, but yet they had some sales offers. And again, here it goes back to being 9 years old. If there's a way to hustle some extra cash, you're going to do it. And that's how I got started. So once I got into that role, a lot of people at the Frontier saw security positions and asked me to roll into those because I understood the technology. Back in college, by the way, and in my first job, AS400 was being used. So as that was really more of a business database, it actually turned into more of a tech position because you had to understand how to use the AS400 and not just click on buttons, right? Because when I was using, you didn't click on buttons, you actually programmed it. You programmed your macros and things like that. So that's how I got in IT. Was starting at Frontier was I always had the first computer. So I don't know if you were on Prodigy or any of those message boards, but yeah, I was. I had
maybe like later on
AOL. My stepfather was a big tech person as well too. So we always had, like, me and him the same year when I was 16 years old, both bought Packard Bells, which cost us $3,000 a piece. Because remember I told you I worked, so I always had some extra cash for those things. But yeah, we both had dial-up. And there would be times when my car would be broke down or I'd be out in the snow and I wouldn't be able to call my dad because the computer line was going because he was on Yahoo playing cards. So I have to call like 1,000 times to knock him off. So computers were always just kind of a back thing. But it's funny because technology really does play a lot in business. It creates efficiencies. I teach AI now too, and real estate has huge amount of technology behind it, and a lot of people don't even see it because you just see me showing you a house and you have no idea how much technology I'm using to find the right house for you when I'm doing it. So, but yeah, I went to there and I worked at Rochester General, and M5 and a couple other companies, all doing IT work.
How did you like IT?
I actually really enjoyed the people part of it. I loved being able to fix something because then you're results driven. So a lot of times in business, you're starting a job, you're starting a deal, or you're doing something. There's never really an end to it. But when you're in IT, it is. You fix something, it works, right? If an email server goes down, you fix it, it starts working. So there was that immediate gratification of any kind of work you did, which I loved. I didn't like, and I don't think we should get too far into the weeds on this one, but when I was in IT, it was very male driven. When I was in banking, it probably was as well. But women did not get paid as well as men. And me personally, maybe it's because of my personality and I want to help people, is that I would be overworked. So I could have 3 other colleagues sitting in there, and I would be the person doing the work. And it didn't matter where I was. Didn't matter if I was at Frontier. Didn't matter if I was at the hospital. Didn't matter if I was at DeMarco or Admar. I was the person that was constantly called. And I asked the question. I said, well, why is it that I have these guys who I know make more money than me? Why aren't they getting the calls? Or they're like, because Pam, they're not personal and they can't speak layman's term. So the problem I had in IT was I was really kind of more abused in that role because I never was of equal pay. And I wouldn't say I had definitely the respect, but I wasn't going to go any farther because it was a male-driven kind of at that point.
Did you advocate for yourself?
Yeah, but when you advocate for yourself and they then hire a director to work above you who literally works dial-up at Monroe Muffler, and you're working on the AS400 servers, you are working securities, you're working with the e-records, you're physically fixing computers yourself that this guy doesn't even know how to open up a computer. You're actually tying down cables for the old phone systems. When two, coworkers get mad at each other and they want to move them away from each other and they're thinking it's just software. There's actually a back end to it to where you're now gotten, punch down wires. And you knew at that time that people didn't really understand those roles, because the person that should be above me should be someone who has the technical ability to be able to do my job if I'm out sick.
So what was the disconnect in that case? As far as, like, obviously you had the skills, you're a hard worker and so on. Like, in a market, usually those skills, that work gets rewarded. Why? Like, what was the disconnect?
I'd love to give you the full version from my point of view, is that they felt like the years in the business and the actual, the roles. So my roles have always been like an IT specialist, things like that. The minute that this guy had a role, he was a manager, IT manager at Monroe Muffler, they just took those, not really considering the fact of the skill behind it. On your resume, you put all this crap down, right? Nobody validates it. There's a lot of companies out there at the time that would actually run securities or certifications. And back then, they didn't care about those things because they weren't paying for it. A lot of times these companies weren't paying for certifications. They just wanted someone that had like the overall arching management skills. And it just seemed like they never promoted the females up the IT change. If you even look at it, even when you look at it at that point, I don't think I ever had a boss ever in IT that was a female. So it kind of was just a known thing. And let's go back to when I was younger. A lot of times there's a lot of male dominated positions out there that really didn't see the value in what a woman could do or capabilities of a woman. So, there were certain roles that women expected to be in. And real estate, by the way, is 54% women. So, that's a big thing, and there's other jobs like accounting and things like that women dominated pretty well, but just not as necessarily banking at that time or IT.
No, because certain roles fit better women, certain other roles fit better men. But as far as IT, I think if you have the smarts, the kind of the grit, the work ethic and so on, I don't see why it would go one way or the other. Like,
I never understood it, but I will say that when I got called on Christmas to fix the CEO's, PlayStation 3 and things like that, and my boss didn't get any phone calls, and he was also had a cell phone, and he was the one that was supposed to be getting the phone calls, that I knew that there was a problem for myself. And I knew at that point that I wasn't going to get farther. So that's how I got into real estate, was that the people, by the way, the people in general who I worked with in IT and the people that I was servicing, I'll say, they loved me. We got along so well. People would call me with problems because I worked with urgency. And that's another thing. A lot of times IT people, they don't always work with urgency because, you're just a ticket. For me, it was a name and a number of someone that I cared about. But we had decided when I started in real estate to foster. We bought a home in Spencerport Schools, and we just thought it was, that we should probably give back, and we decided to start fostering. The company itself, actually, at the time, was very supportive. They said, yes, we love this idea, because of course I got to talk to my employer because it's going to affect my work, skills, because when everybody else is calling sick about their kids, guess who's not? I would have to be there because I don't have kids. So I needed to make sure they kind of understood the commitment. And they're totally supportive of what I was doing. But within about 3 months of us fostering, our foster son was literally suspended probably 4 times in Spenceport. And Spenceport tried to keep him in school. I have to say that I think Spenceport did a way better job with him than they did me, because they took it on. They thought that for some reason they were the problem. And I would actually walk into the superintendent's office and they would say to me, Pam, what do you want us to do? We're so sorry. Like, how can we help? And I'm thinking, like, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, what are you guys talking about? You guys are doing everything you possible to have this child in your school district. You know, he's just going to struggle. So with that being said, I realized I couldn't really work a full-time job in a traditional setting. And that's how I got into real estate.
Okay. So what was your transition like as far as, like, did you just like cold turkey switch over, or was it gradual? What was
so I took my I had started with it again. Work knew about me, kind of starting about the transition. We actually took the first test, and when I took the first test, I failed it, but it was because, again, work life, trying to do everything at once. I think I was just really stressed out, not realizing it. And so my husband actually said to me, he goes, Pam, he's like, why don't we do this? He's like, the work is crazy. And my work was, by the way, I still worked 40 hours, but the phone calls were just, I took care of everything. In the IT world, you would assume it's just like, you know, emails, things like that. But they would do Walmart jobs where I would literally have to put together like a job site for them to have printers and like badging and all this other stuff, and Verizon cell phones, and like the list just went on and on and on. So there was just a lot there. So my husband said, he's like, listen, I'll put $5,000 aside. Why don't you just quit working and go get your license? So I did, but I was very anxious about that. And then I had a good friend. I was looking at all the different real estate companies, and she said, you know what? I know you're getting your license. Why don't you just come into our office and start taking and just being part of our classes? Which isn't normal. Normally you have to sign up with them and you have to be licensed, but they allowed me to go first there. So that kind of put me in the mindset of real estate. So, and they kept giving me kind of little pointers like, hey, you know, go start your database. You know, start doing these little things while you're waiting, right? And so I personally feel like when getting started, I had enough of a push of the little things that really created a great environment for me to be in real estate. I will say that being self-employed, I know one of the biggest things usually is that there's fear of being self-employed. And that's what kept me going. That's actually what pushed me to be successful in the business, is that I didn't want to fail. And I was so fearful of failing that I was like, you know what? Again, if I stop, that's when I fail. So I got to keep going. And but I got my license, started my classes, and my mentor at the time, we'll put out there, Carolyn Stifler, who took me on, she said to me, she's like, you know, there's agents a lot of times that get sick or life changes, things like that, to where they might have some clients to pass your way. And I said, okay. So she gave me some suggestions. So I called some agents while still trying to get my business going. And what's kind of crazy is most agents take probably 6 months to get started. I had my first deal in 30 days, but I did every open house. I don't even know if that ever had a Saturday and Sunday off. My first year in general, there was not a Saturday or Sunday that I either wasn't working or I wasn't doing open house at all. And in my first year, I did some things that are a little, I'm going to say unconventional. I had a coming out party, that me coming into real estate, mortgage person and attorney, and them, we invited all my friends, everybody that was out there. And I'll say this from a business standpoint for anybody who is thinking about opening their business up. Don't expect your friends to show up at those events. What I found out was the people that showed up had it on their mind for some reason in the next 5 years to buy or sell real estate. Because when I went to that party, I had someone who knew way more than I did, taking everybody's names and numbers down and helping me build my database, right? So they were helping me build my database that I had no idea what I was doing. And I definitely didn't know what I was doing. And what I found interesting is in my first year, even though I sold 21 houses, I only sold one house to someone I knew. So that meant that every open house I had to get a client. That meant that it was, whether it was a referral from another agent or this and that. But my actual cousin, she had a house that was for sale that she wanted to sell, and she allowed me to sell her house for her. And my proctor, who gave me tea and stuff to calm me down, Rosalie from Rochester, she actually came to that party. And I think I cried 4 or 5 different times, because everybody just came to me and hugged me and said, "You're going to do great." And it's funny because being self-employed, you're like, how am I going to be great? Like, how do you know? I don't know. You know, what is it that you're seeing? And I think I asked that like 3 or 4 different times. People are like, what is it that you're seeing? Because I need to grab that and hold on to it, right? But so what ended up happening was Rosalie actually hugged me and said, "You're going to help me buy and sell houses." And I'm thinking, she's proctored a lot of realtors, you know, why me? But we did. We ended up selling her family's houses. I think we ended up selling 5 houses together in probably 3 years. She actually moved. I helped her move. I helped her sons move, her family. But yeah, I think my second year in real estate, up there, I sold 50 houses.
So that was, you had a mentor, right? She was your mentor?
For first 5. Yep. First 5 deals. There was a mentor. And by my 3rd deal, her response to me was, "So Pam, my job is just to keep you out of real estate jail." So, so you guys probably already know that what was outside the box or what, you know, is in the lines. I like to color outside the lines for sure. But I had some really interesting experiences my first 2 years that really created the 10 years because there were things that I did my first year. It wasn't about how many deals. It was about education. I just wanted to make sure my first year that I knew how to do everything. I did a foreclosure. I did a short sale. You know, I did listings. There was nothing that I'm going to say I was afraid of, but I wasn't afraid of it. Why? Because I was so naive. I didn't know. I didn't know any difference, right? So, yeah. So I did everything, and then what came about was by my second year, almost into my 3rd, people started calling me and saying, "Hey Pam, how do I do a short sale? Hey Pam, how do I do a foreclosure?" Or I had clients saying, "You know what? I really like this foreclosure." If I hadn't done that my first year, I would have been like, "Oh, let me get you somebody." But now that I knew how to do it, it was an easy thing to do, right? And I got some people some really killer deals. I actually got a guy with a house that has an indoor pool that the house did not appraise properly, and it went out of contract. And I got him that house for $121,000 in Greece. He's still living there today.
Wow.
So, because they couldn't account the square footage of the inside pool as a part of the house. So he pretty much got all that square footage for free. So if he would have put a heater in there, he can do that. Now there's square footage. So, yeah. But yeah, so that was a lot of the success. I would say it was just learning as much as you can.
So you lived in Rochester and then moved to Charlotte. What was your kind of rationale or reasoning for moving down here?
We had talked for about 5 or 6 years moving to Charlotte because my sister had lived technically in Clover and in those areas. My mom lived in Rock Hill. My aunt lived in Rock Hill. And what ended up happening, or the conversation that was being had, was my nieces and nephews were so young that we weren't really getting to see their basketball games, their football games, things like that. And I would get phone calls being like, "Hey, Aunt Pam, are you coming?" And it's like, I really can't. But what ended up happening was my dad passed right before me and Aaron got married. So my sister took, let my mom live with her, and, was just kind of holding life together. And my mom wasn't traveling. She wasn't doing a lot on her own, but she wanted to do those things. And then we also noticed that every year, whether it was Christmas, this might even been with you too, Christmas, Easter, that our family down here would want us to come. So we didn't get vacations. So the whole entire time that me and Aaron are married, we got our honeymoon, which was Hawaii, but we went to Disney with my family. We had no other real vacations ever. So we didn't get to go to Aruba or Turks and Caicos. And we just realized that every time we were coming back from vacation, we were exhausted because we were down here with our family. So we didn't really have a really good work-life balance because we weren't really getting away. So we said, why not move to Charlotte? Which is kind of a crazy thing because I was doing so well in real estate up there and I knew so many people. But we just felt like, you know what, let's make that move. So that's kind of how we did it. It still took us probably like a year and a half to make that move, but we did make it pretty quickly.
And making that kind of move, like how did that impact your life, your relationship with your husband and everything else around?
My husband fared very well. I think, by the way, anytime you're moving, I don't know if it's just to Charlotte, I don't know if you experienced this or not, but there was 6 months of a transition where my husband's like, let's just move back to Rochester. But because Charlotte is so transient, if you meet one person, you only meet one person. You don't meet a tribe of people or, or a group of people. In real estate, it was hard too. So before I had talked to my broker in Rochester, my plan was to literally just go to Charlotte and start selling houses. But they said, hey, why don't you put a team up here? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who? Who wants to work with me? I'm like, are you kidding me? But I had a couple good friends up there that said, yeah, we'll work with you. And I was glad for that, because once I got down here, I realized how hard it was going to be to get started, that I was still selling for a year and a half more houses in Rochester than I was down here in Charlotte. And I've been 8 years here in Charlotte now, and I still, as of even last year, I was selling a significant amount of houses in Rochester compared to what I was doing in Charlotte. So the transition was probably harder for me. Aaron actually got a kick-ass job. His company up in Frontier, which we worked for, allowed him to move. And the minute that they heard that he was out of New York, I guess the whole state taxes, a whole bunch of IT engineering companies wanted him. So he literally got a job that said unlimited pay. That would be amazing. Unlimited vacation time. They sent him all of his equipment. He could work from home. And it was a $40,000 raise. So it was kind of one of those things where we didn't realize the benefit for Aaron, but and he's very happy still with that same company today. So for him, it was a huge benefit. For us, we definitely struggled making friends because we had a lot of friends in New York. A lot of them would come down to meet us and see us and vacation with us. But I will say the best thing about moving to Charlotte was even some of our goals, which was to get a passport and take a cruise. We were able to do those things very quickly. We started going places. I mean, since we've been here, we've been able to go to like Aruba, Turks and Caicos, Italy. I'm sure there's other places that we went to that were great too that I can't even remember. But it was just the fact that, first of all, Charlotte's a hub. Second of all, my family's not expecting me to be everywhere, when you're on your vacation time. So we definitely have a really good work-life balance here. And now we have quite a bit of friends here. So we do things, and we still go to Rochester. So I go see my foster son in Rochester. I see my friends in Rochester. And so I used to take about 4 trips a year with work. But now we're just up to 1 a year right now.
Just once going to Rochester, yeah. What would you recommend for younger adults who are just getting into their careers as far as how to choose the right thing to do?
So I think it was about 4 years ago. When you get into real estate, a lot of times they'll do a DISC profile. If you guys know what DISC is, DISC. I suggest, and I'm an analyst, so if you ever want to send me a copy of your DISC, I'll look it over for you. But I would suggest doing a DISC profile. Talk about the jobs that you want. Go through your DISC profile and look at what jobs align with those positions, because I really feel like that gives you a better ability to enjoy what you're doing. A lot of people just get a job for how much it makes, or the time or whatever. It's not about the enjoyment of what your job is. And if you really are aligning with your personality with the job, I think that makes way better sense, because there's longevity with that. Because it's not always just about the pay. It's about the empowerment. Sometimes it's about the creativity that you want in your position. But I would definitely say doing your DISC profile. And my goddaughter and my nieces and nephews, they've all asked me to DISC profile them so that they kind of checked. And most of their jobs that they picked were pretty in line with their DISC profile.
So personality kind of drives.
I think so. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. What about in terms of managing their money? As far as I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of youth that's like mismanaging whatever money they do have. What are some good advice for them to manage it better?
So I don't want to go on off a tangent here, but when I was in high school, we took a bookkeeping class, a checkbooking class. They don't offer those anymore. Right. I actually have some friends who are in team building after school programs that are saying that credit and money management needs to be a class that's taught, whether it is in the high schools or whatever form, because the assumption is that you run out of money when there's no more money in your bank account. And kids a lot of times don't realize that there's this thing called bouncing, or that they'll let their credit card or their debit card go through, but they'll charge them extra money for it. They also don't understand about the ability of kind of, I'm gonna say morphing their credit by their parents putting them on their credit cards as quickly as possible. I've done that for the teens in my household where they all sit on my credit cards so that somebody can't take advantage of them with the interest rates as they are right now, especially. And we have those conversations. So I'm going to say that if you feel like you don't have the financial, ability to take care of your expenses, even if you have to, go onto YouTube or a Skillshare or a Skill Pop and really take some of those classes, because I do feel like when you start building credit, the minute that you mispay a car payment, or the car payment is, off, or you forget it, or a credit card or something stupid, that stays on your credit for almost a year. So and by the way, they're like, well, I'm not buying a house today, Pam. Well, that's true, but guess what? Now apartments are doing that too. So apartments are actually looking at your credit and wanting to see if there's credit worthiness before they're even taking people. They'll even take your money still. They'll take your security deposit, they'll take your rent, and they'll charge you about $4,000 up front. And they'll still want you to have like anywhere from a 670 to 700 credit score to rent. And a lot of kids who are just started that might not even have a credit card, or there's just one, don't have enough credit to get there, because credit is also credit history. So the sooner you start with having some kind of credit, regardless of what it is the better place to be. And don't use more than 30% of your credit cards. So sometimes it's kind of crazy, but getting a second credit card to kind of offset some of those things makes more sense. And an astute person would say you pay your credit cards off. If you don't have the money to buy what you need, you pay your credit cards off.
So going to real estate industry, what are some trends that you see today in Charlotte area or nationwide?
Well, right now, interest rates, they're quoting over 7% right now. And I'll say for September, they're saying that the Fed, 98% chance that the Fed is going to reduce the interest rates, not by a lot. It's still going to be significant interest. And that is creating trends of fact that people are paying cash for their houses. If you see someone with a VA, where you're just talking about the VA or an FHA, people are trying to figure out how they can assume the loans so that you're not paying the 8 or 9%. So the trends right now is, how does anybody avoid paying the current interest rates and still purchasing a home? The rental market is starting on a decline. There is, a surplus of houses and rentals, especially in Charlotte, because Charlotte was a stock market. They were called, it was a RIT. It was trading. And so there's quite a bit of rentals in our area that we've always been in a 14-year deficit for housing. But because of some of the interest rates, which I don't know if you guys understand this part, but as interest rates go up, your buying power decreases. And the cost of buying a home is significantly more. The interest rates have literally gone up. I think it's almost 4% just in the 3 years. What I'm saying is that the last 2 years, it went up that much, but in 2022, you literally could have gotten an interest rate less than 3%. And now today, you're over 7%. So it's, normally interest rates take, 5 or 6 years to get that high. But because they're trying to fight inflation, it's costing more money. There's nothing that they're doing to offset that. Right now, the same grants that were there before are there. And so that really still makes things difficult. And in some cases, when people come to me about buying a home, sometimes it is cheaper for them to be renting if it makes sense because of the cost of buying.
What do you see the industry going, like in what direction, like from a year to 5 years? Where do you see it heading?
Well, I don't see us declining. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm waiting for the bubble. I don't think there's going to be a bubble. I think that there's enough of people moving to Charlotte that's going to keep it even keeled. It may not be going 10 and 20% in the normal changes, but you still have probably like a 3%. I mean, if you think about when you starting to look at buying, right? We were at what, $400,000 in some of the homes that we were looking at approximately, and they're now what, 670.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I think that was like a 3,000 square foot home, maybe even a 3,000 square foot. So you're at over $200 per square foot almost anywhere here in Charlotte. If you can find something under 200,000, there's either something wrong with it or it's a good deal, just buy it. But there's not anywhere. I mean, you're talking about all the way from Lincoln, Vale, all the way out to Stanfield, all the different. It's funny because when you look at Charlotte, there's a lot of lakes around us. So you have, Baden Lake, you have, Lake Watery, you got Lake Lure, you got Lake Norman, you got all these different lakes. So all these rural areas around Charlotte actually pull in some decent money because the rural areas do have lakefront or touristy or vacation kind of places. So in the 5-year span, I would say that we're probably going to push into Raleigh, if possible, with a lot of the new construction stuff that we have. I'm hoping that they're going to pull that train together from Raleigh to Charlotte. The market, I think the interest rates are hopefully going to level off a little bit to find some affordable homes for people. But I think the market is just going to go up.
So when you say push into Raleigh, what do you mean by that?
So when you're looking at the east side of Charlotte, and you see how there's like Locust, you see how there is Albemarle, things like that. Everybody likes Pinehurst, right? So everybody likes Pinehurst. Raleigh is pretty much right there, right above Pinehurst. You got Uwharrie Forest, and if you drive out there and you just take a drive out to Albemarle, you're going to assume that you're going to see a whole bunch of rural homes. These homes are beautiful. If you're driving, you might see a whole bunch of woods. You look to the left, and there's this big mansion. You look to the right, there's this house. Some of these little towns are really starting to pick up, and nobody's talking about it. So nobody's really having the conversation or is talking about it. But I have some really good friends that are selling real estate out in that area, and I've sold quite a few in Albemarle. And to be honest, it's a big town. So when you're looking at the progression, Charlotte's got to push out. Why does Charlotte have to push out? Because there isn't a lot of land inside of Charlotte available. So you got to find places to put people. And it looks like, there's a lot of people in Raleigh, and we do a lot of business with Raleigh. A lot of commercial between Raleigh and Charlotte.
Okay. As far as challenges in the market, like what do you feel or see that is the biggest challenge for real estate today?
For the consumer?
I guess look at it from both sides.
So for the consumer, that it's the cost of doing business. If you bought a home in 2019 and your interest rate was less than 3%, and your mortgage payment, I'm just going to come up with some round numbers, your mortgage payment is, less than $2,000, for you to take the equity of whatever you have in that home and you put it into your next home, you're going to be over $2,000 because you're pretty much over doubled. So the problem is that why would I do that? What is it that's pushing me, or what's the life event? Because that's the only reason we're selling real estate right now is life events. Someone's retiring, they're downsizing, someone's dying, someone's getting married. Again, it's just the space of the home that doesn't work for those people anymore, but they've got to it's got to make sense. So let's just say that you're my neighbor and I don't like you. Back in the day, I'm just going to go look for another house. If I didn't like an HOA, I'm just going to look for another house. Right now, that's not the case. People are like, well, if you talk to your financial advisors, and by the way, I think everybody should have a financial advisor. I wouldn't even make any business decisions without a financial advisor. The conversation I even have, again, I just told you guys that, this is my birthday, 50, right? We're sitting talking about retirement and how does that impact us. And by the way, being a realtor, and I'm like, well, probably in 2 years, we'll sell our house and we'll downsize. We don't need 4,300 square foot, right? But when I talked to my financial advisor, he goes, why would you do that? And I'm like, okay, let me just repeat myself. I really don't need 4,300 square foot. And he's like, yeah, but what about the mortgage of $2,000? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you're not getting a mortgage for $2,000. So to that point, yeah, I might have the square footage, but the payment, when you talk to a financial advisor, that's what they care about. What's your overall cost? My cost is relatively low in comparison to the average rental in Charlotte. Average rental in Charlotte is anywhere from $1,800 to $2,400. And yet I have a home that has, 4 bedrooms for the exact same price. So our conversation was, maybe we downsize to a smaller place. maybe we go rent something because, I really like the Valentine Bowl and the amp. And there's some really cute, trendy areas that are coming about, like Waverly, things like that, to where it's like, maybe you just start kind of decreasing your expenses. But anything we talked about was actually increasing our expenses, because making that transition, not out of need, but because, we're like, let's just get a smaller place, made no sense. In fact, some of the conversation was about buying a second property. Buy a second property and having a rental or having an Airbnb, because even if we bought that property now, I told you guys the market's going to continue to go up. If we buy a house that's relatively cheap now, that's in a community that we might want to move to in the future, and we rent it out now, we're actually going to be saving ourselves almost 9 to 10% in the future, because we're buying it now with the money that we have in our investments. So, so as a consumer, really right now, people are just moving based on true need. Like, it's the family's making a change or an adjustment. And real estate's always been around life events anyway, so it's kind of a known thing. But during COVID, everybody was moving. I don't even think I know. Every time I talk to someone, like, I moved in 2019. Yeah, I moved in 2020. Like, everybody was moving at that point. Very rarely do you see anybody that wasn't moving at that point. And then as a realtor, if you have a realtor that you really love, call them, text them, and send them your love, because it is a hard market. There's a lot of changes going on that I don't want to get into at this point that are affecting the real estate market. There is a change in the buyer's agreements that we have.
I heard something about that.
Yeah. So, technically, and the word is technically, as an agent, if you said, hey, I want to look at a house, we would have to go under contract. We'd have to have a contract together. I couldn't show a house without you signing something. So I can't show you one house. So if I met you and your car was in front of a house right now, and you said, hey, I'd like to take a look at it, unless I was a listing agent, I couldn't show it to you without an agency agreement. So, and at the same time, you also have to know the worthiness of the buyer. The buyer's got to come up with their own commission. There's a whole bunch of gray to that, but in the grand scheme of things, is that the seller is technically, and never has been, to be honest, responsible for the buyer's commissions. It's always been a negotiation, but when you hired a listing agent, she actually covered both sides of it, and now they're allowing the opportunity of not having any monies brought forward by the seller.
How does that work? Like, who comes up with these rules and who enforces them?
It was a lawsuit. It was a lawsuit, and unfortunately, the lawsuit had some validity to it. There's certain brokerages out there, and by the way, nobody intentionally was doing anything wrong. That's the crazy part of it, is that when I work for my brokerage, and again, I told you guys I color outside the lines, I'm an independent contractor. And if you hired me to sell your home, and I would say, okay, based on the value proposition that I'm bringing forward, this is how much commission I would ask for, right? And I would tell you, and I'm going to collaborate with buyer's agents because I want them to bring I want them to bring the clients, right? Mm-hmm. So what seemed to happen is that when there was a communication of very similar piece, the seller came back and probably said something about, like, I have no interest in paying the other, agent, or I don't want to collaborate. And the person went back to the brokerage, and the brokerage is like, we're not a discount brokerage. This is the way we do business. And someone held their feet to the fire that, no, the truth is that it's a free, it is a free world, free market, right? And if someone chooses not to do that, you, as an agent, by the way, independent contractor, she had a choice to walk away from that, but I guess try to push the initiative, and this is how we do business, which is not true, because there's no standards when it comes down to real estate. So unfortunately, that has created a lot of problems for people who truly don't have the upfront cash to buy. Mm-hmm. So, you said your daughters get married. She goes to get married, and, they want to buy a house for $300,000. She's going to have to come up with almost $12,000 to purchase. Now she's going to have to come up with another $9,000, because at $300,000, there's a commission involved. A buyer agent can't represent that person without commission, right? So someone's got to pay. So now, on top of her money, and again, by the way, this is all negotiable. These are just round figures. We're not talking about any standards here. But she's going to have to come up with additional funds to cover that. And the interest rate right now, I told you that we're talking about over 7%. So now your daughter is going to have to finance potentially almost a lot of that, or get funds from her parents to help her buy a home, rather than paying someone $2,400 a month in rent for the next 2 years of her life, which, then there you go. You're almost at $50,000, $60,000 that she paid out because she didn't have the affordability of potentially buying a home. So it's going to affect some people. And for me, business as usual. I'm going to list homes. I'm going to have the same conversation I had before, but it does affect a lot of different people out there.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned technology in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
What is some new technology, and how is it helping you kind of do your business better?
Mm-hmm. So I think I told you that, I teach AI. And in one of my classes, I teach AI to realtors as well. And when we're having these discussions, I want to back up for 1 minute here. Canopy, who's our actual association, when I got down here, the technology they already had was amazing. Whether it came to documents, signing documents, came back to doing like comparative market analysis, making sure that the information that you're getting a baseline, right? So as a realtor, let's just say, remember I told you my first year I didn't even know what I was doing. When we were doing our CMAs, we were pulling our own comps. But we now have software out there that is telling us these are the closest ones. These are the ones that you would normally pull. And they're going back to the actual tax departments. They're going back to the title work and validating those kind of comps to make sure they work for your listing. So not a lot of times do I have to go in and kind of like say, oh, that one looks good. Oh, that one looks good. It'll come up and give you suggestions of homes to potentially put in as a comparison that are the closest to make sure that you're accurate with your numbers. Mm-hmm. So that is a really good piece of software. But as we talk through this, having apps that your client can drive through a neighborhood and all of a sudden just click on a button and say, hey, I like this house. And the minute they favorite, it comes to you. It's a huge thing, because back in the 80s, remember they had this big, huge book, the big, huge cell phones, and they'd have to call in that piece of paper. Now everything's so digital that I can even write a contract from my phone. Just a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So the technology has made our jobs more efficient. We have an app that gets us into the houses. So, they have the old combo boxes that are a combination, but there's an app on my phone that gets me right into the houses. I just click on my little thing. It puts me on there. It's secure. It actually gives a digital footprint of who's going in the house. That is available in technology. When it comes down to doing my job, though, and being the best at what I'm doing, the technology itself is helping me when I'm speaking to my client. We may have a conversation, and just because I'm certified in DISC, sometimes I'll miss up on cues. So let's just say, and let's just use this as an example. So Jerry, I'm going to talk to you about buying a home, and as I'm talking to you, which I already know your personality, I'm going to tell you about the colors, and I'm going to tell you about how nice the place is and how luxurious the house is. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to miss the cue when you come back and like, well, what's the square footage? What's the price per square foot? How many rooms is it? Because, for you, your personality, you're not really caring about necessarily, you want it to look good, right? But you care about the details. Mm-hmm. So sometimes as a realtor, you can mess up on that. So I might talk, by the way, this happens quite a bit. And I feel sorry for my husband, but there's some houses that I absolutely, absolutely love. And I'll come home and say to my husband, like, oh my God, we got to buy this house. It's like absolutely gorgeous. And it's like got this and it's got this, it's got that. And he's like, Pam, how are we putting our stuff in a 2,000 square foot home? How's that happening? Because my husband's detailed. He cares. He's like, I know square footage of 4,300 doesn't fit in a 2,000 square foot. And he also knows, he's like, why would we pay the same amount of money for the 2,000 square foot home? I'm like, because it's got views. So when it comes down to the AI in general, there's AI out there that will tell you the personality of who you're talking to. So that I'm giving you the pertinent information that matters to you. So sometimes realtors, and I'm definitely one of those people, sometimes I'll talk to you about what excites me because I think it should excite you. And that's just more my personality. But the fact is that what excites me isn't going to necessarily excite you, but I'm going to know that. So now I can bring the details that matter to you. So if we went and sat down and we had coffee and I'm showing you all these different things, I'm not going to show you pretty pictures. I'm going to show you the actual details. I'm going to show you the price per square foot. I'm going to show you the bedroom sizes, all that different stuff, and a floor plan. And I'm going to say, yeah, the house looks pretty decent. And then you're like, and then if you like it, you're like, okay, show me the pictures, because the details matter before the pictures.
So the software gives you that ability to like you plug in the customer's personality type and it gives you kind of
it actually, by the way, it actually uses LinkedIn.
Okay.
So Crystal AI, if you guys want it, it's called Crystal Knows. We'll give you 10 free profiles to know on LinkedIn. So what'll happen is if I use Crystal AI, and by the way, there's other software that's very similar, but if I have a client that sends me an email and I go to send them an email back and they have any kind of social profile, it'll actually come back to me and tell me how I need to put together my email. Does my email need to be concise? Does it need some fluff? Does it need, hi, how are you? Does it, and they'll say, hey, this person's a little more creative. You might want to do this. Hey, this person only looks at bullet points, so that I know how to kind of put together my emails that better suits my client.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Definitely. As far as your daily routines, being a realtor, what are your daily routines like?
It's a lot. So in real estate, you're starting your mornings with a lot of mind stuff first. And by the way, I never believed in meditating or any kind of affirmations or anything before I was self-employed, but getting your head straight before you actually email or text anybody is probably a key piece. You probably are spending a good hour in the morning with yourself, going through your goals, going through your affirmations, going through your mindset, putting down what's important. Because what'll happen as a realtor is if you don't have those things, they call you popcorn agents. And the minute that somebody calls you, you're handling that. So you could have a deal closing tomorrow that might not have all the pieces. But if you're a popcorn agent, which this has happened to me, someone calls me and is like, hey, Pam, I really want to see such and such house and I want to do this and I got this. You're making phone calls based on that circumstances, but you may not have everything ready for closing tomorrow. So if you don't have your organized schedule of what you're doing, it really can take you out of it. I mean, even if you think about this, and by the way, I'm kind of putting myself out there, but you know, how many times have you called me and said, hey, I want to go see a house? And I'm like, let's do it, right? Because for me, I want to go out there and know the market, but I might have 30 other things going on in my life that are technically a priority over seeing a house. And, you know, if you don't fix your mental state in the morning before you do those things, you're going to work until 10, 11 o'clock at night, like I do, because I want to go out there and do what I need to do. And then I just come back and I'm like, you know what? I can work later. I can always work later. I can always work a Saturday. I can always work a Sunday. Realtors work on the weekend. So it takes a lot from you, but literally you're doing your mindset. You're then making your phone calls to your clients. You're following up on deals. You're following up in your emails. You're actually spending time with other vendors. So you're spending coffee with we're talking about home improvements and, you know, Four Season rooms, things like that. We're having those conversations. I'm talking to my electrician. Like if you think about before I even got here today, I went to the gym this morning. I actually met some people, talked to them. I've talked to 3 electricians, talked to 5 realtors, probably spent over 100 different text messages, confirmed showings for tomorrow, confirmed appointments for tomorrow, checked on what the weekend's plans were, because a lot of with your clients, you got to go out with your clients. And then at the same time, I did eat lunch today, and I checked on my deals that are closing, and I sent out probably over 600 emails about my listings. So I did that, and it's 2 o'clock. So you have to be on top of your game.
Would you say you like to coordinate things?
I'm not a coordinator. One of the reasons I think I was self-employed was because I like the random. Mm-hmm. I know that in real estate you have to be organized and you have to coordinate things, but to be 100% honest, I love just doing and being. I'm not a planner. That, when they talk about your dispersonalities and things like that, the actual personality or the learned skill is to try to be more of a planner or organizing things, because I've failed enough to know that if I would have planned, it probably would have went better. So I'm not a planner, but I will say I'm more of a visionary, because when people sometimes look at me and be like, oh no, she definitely is a planner. I'm not a planner. I have a vision, and I'm very mechanical in brain. That's probably why I was good in IT, but I deconstruct everything. So, and I'll deconstruct it to see if I fail at it.
So we're talking about
Go ahead.
disc. Are you high I?
And D.
And
My
D.
D's higher than my I.
Okay, so DI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Quick decision making, acts quickly to things. And then the high I obviously is the party. I guess
social.
my ninth grade teacher was right about that. But, for myself, I never want to do the same thing over and over again. Even in IT, I never did the same thing every day. There were so many things that I was managing and servicing that it was always something different. You talk to a different person. I think I get a lot of my energy from people. So when people are like, oh my gosh, it's 5 o'clock and she's still going as fast as she's going right now. But it's because of the energy I pull from other people. The minute I sit down at night, I don't even want to talk to anyone. And when I get up in the morning, I don't want to talk to anyone either. I'm pretty sure all the way over to the gym this morning, I didn't even talk to my husband. I don't even know if I talked to him really at the gym. I did text my neighbor who was at the gym just to say, hey, what are you doing? But other than that, I don't like talking until I'm in it. So once I'm in my business, I'm in my business. But there's a lot of times that I'm quiet in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't like being asked questions. I don't like 1,000 questions. I'm not going to say my husband, who does that to me pretty often. We actually did his disc profile, complete opposite of mine. And
so he's what, like CS or SC?
He's a DC.
Oh, DC, okay.
So we're both very dominant in our things, but he analyzes everything.
Over-analysis?
Oh, yeah.
Analysis paralysis?
Yeah. And I just want to do it. So, before we do something, my husband wants to ask 1,000 questions. I'm already out the door in the car. So, yeah. So it's kind of funny because one of our friends was saying that they had a struggle with their teens and they weren't really clicking. And I said, you should do a disc profile. So my husband went and did that. We knew what our profiles were, but we brought it up and he went through the different pieces. He's like, all of a sudden, after we're done talking about our profiles, we just stopped talking naturally. And he texts our friends. He's like, so I think me and Pam are working out real well right now. His friend goes, what do you mean? He's like, we're just not talking because we realize that us talking doesn't really help our relationship. So, yeah. So, again, understanding people's personalities is a big thing because when you're texting people, it's hard to know the personality that you're texting.
Right.
Everything is so, I'm going to say cold at this point that it's very hard that you ever get two people in the same room that's having a real conversation. And I think some people are like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, when you're going to networking events or social events or things like that, there's 3 questions that's asked. It's like, hey, what's your name? Hey, what do you do for a living? Hey, how many kids do you have? What church do you go to? Right? Like that seems to be like the thing. And then once those questions are answered, usually they go into the next person. So the funny piece about this is even I'm going to go to a networking event tonight too. And thankfully I know a lot of people, so I'll probably have a little bit more of a conversation with people, but that is the normal thing. And when you go to parties and stuff, some people, they start talking, but they might talk to you about all the stuff they're doing and then ask those questions and then they're to the next person. So it's very rare that you actually are in a social environment to where you're understanding or getting to know people at a deep level. And understanding their personalities allows you to connect quicker and faster and actually care about that person because now you're thinking about their personality before you're even engaging them. Because think about it, like if you walked in a room and you don't know that person, you're going to think of, oh, what should I ask or what should I say, right? But now that you understand their personality, you're going to be the person asking and you're actually going to engage and you're going to care about other people because everybody's about instant gratification and they all talk about themselves. And even on this podcast, I could have been talking for an hour about myself here because I can do that. But you have to appreciate and understand that there's another person in the room. And when another person's in the room, you really need to hear about them and you need to get to know them and create the deeper relationship because you only buy business and sell things to people that you trust.
So maybe for networking events, people not only should they have their name on the sign, but should have a disc profile.
What's my disc profile?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's sometimes, when I've taught some classes and stuff, we've actually had everybody put in a bowl unique things that nobody knows about them. So that even though their name and stuff is there, that when you're pulling them out, everybody's like, which profile would this meet or things like that? Because then people start to know that person. They're like, oh my gosh. And then after that's done, guess what happens? That person will go over and talk to me. It's like, I knew that was your personality, or I knew you did that, or, oh, I can't believe, I've known you for 20 years. I never knew that about you. So it creates another level of understanding of a person. And that's one thing that we're not doing. We're allowing computers to understand people more than we are as the individual understanding people.
Yeah. When it comes to client interaction, what are some questions or concerns that clients have about real estate?
Well, the first thing is that, and we'll just talk about the first-time home buyers, is that can they afford to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the process? Doesn't matter how many ebooks are out there. Doesn't matter how much stuff is documented out there about buying a home. A lot of them are so nervous, which I was too, about buying a home, and the judgment. So if they follow the ebook that's out there, it says, okay, meet your professional, right? By the way, I have no problem with helping you. But at the same time, they say, go get pre-approved. Well, you go get pre-approved, you're being judged, and you don't even know if you're ready to be judged. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times those conversations are like, can we even do this? We're renting, we've been renting, we have a little bit of money saved. Is that enough? So people are always asking, is their down payment enough? They're asking, do we have the credit worthiness? Our credit scores are this. So, can we do it? And the credit scores kind of change based on the guidelines. The guidelines change. So credit scores can be different levels at different times. So you never know. So I understand why a first-time home buyer wouldn't know, because sometimes they say 600 credit score is great. And then you'll see FHA guidelines say 580 or better. But they don't realize they're paying a higher interest rate sometimes at that point. So a lot of them just don't know how to even get started from them. Some will go to open houses, and then they'll get a little nervous because why? It's commitment. So your people that are renting right now, there is commitment issues because they want to travel the world. I don't know if you realize that even more if you know social media, that everybody is posting the pictures of where they're going and all these things to where people are okay with renting so that they can be transient, so that they're not in one spot. I don't know how many people but technically right now, someone's moving every 4.5 years. So whether it's in the same town, city, whatever, but the fact is that more people are wanting the ability to be able to make changes quickly. So some of them are renting for those reasons. So if they kind of get over that hump, they're like, we're getting married. And that's usually kind of when I start talking to some people. Very rarely will I get like a 23 or 24-year-old who is just getting started talking about home. Mm-hmm. But those ones make the most money, by the way. Because the ones that are talking about a home at 23 and 24 years old, and they bought their house even for $100,000 or $200,000, by the time they're ready to buy their second or third house, they're already at $600,000. And they already had the money. So that means that they're not paying just 3%. They put $300,000, $400,000 down. Some of my clients that I helped in 2019 buy a home, they actually started off, let's say they bought a home for $300,000. The houses are worth $600,000. I even have clients that bought a home at, $4, it's now worth $7. So they're taking $400,000 and buying their dream home at $800,000. So there's a lot of equity for those people that start early. But a lot of times it's the fact that rents are getting higher. They'll make the phone call and they're just not sure. So the question again is down payment, credit scores, when can we move? How long's the process? They don't realize the process can be as quick as, 60 days. But at the same time, I usually have some conversations with my clients almost 2 to 3 years beforehand. Did I answer all the questions?
Not all. I got more.
Okay.
As far as skills and qualities, as far as the realtor, what are the skills and qualities do you think are essential to be successful in the field?
I think being genuine, knowing that the realtor that you're working with really does care, because you're taking your high. Usually, it's your biggest purchase ever in life. So when you have that, going to Zillow and just picking a realtor off that site that they paid to be a part of is not the greatest idea. And I'm sure some of these realtors are great, but you really want someone who is telling you, hey, this person helped me, and this is the care that I got. As our ethics, we're supposed to care. But again, I just talked to you about personalities. Not everybody is genuine. Not everybody cares about you as a person. So those two pieces matter. The person is that the actual abilities, and the ability is that to be able to get you the actual information quickly, to understand and inform you on those things, to where if you are buying a house, and let's just say that you love the house, and that realtor's like, okay, let me just write an offer for you, and you tell your agent, well, write it for this, without them doing any of the research, that's a problem. Because we shouldn't just be writing blank checks to something without doing all the research. There should be research. There should be, comparatives. There should be a whole bunch of stuff done to make sure, does that house make sense? What does that house do for you in 3 to 4 years? And have those conversations. So when I hold my buyer consultations with people, I don't necessarily always work with everybody that I sit down with. But when that person is telling me about their 4 or 5 year goal, they're like, oh no, we're going to be in the house for 10 years. I'm like, I hear you. You're going to be in the house for 10 years. I'm going to assume you're only going to be there for 4 years because that's the stats. And why does that matter? That matters because I got to make sure that you have enough equity in that home in 4 years to purchase your next home. And I don't have a crystal ball. I can only use the projections and knowing the things that I have to make sure that when you're buying a home, it's quality enough to get you to your next and third home to where you're not underwater. So you want to have someone who understands technology, understands how to use technology, works with urgency, has trust and care in their job.
Yeah. Some good advice. What about a good story, most memorable story from work or personal life or whatever it is?
Memorable story. Well, I have so many memories. I guess as you're turning into your 50, you have so many things. You're like, man, I wish I would have known this or things like that. But, I just remember buying my first home, and I think it's just because of what we've been talking about. But when I bought my first home, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know I'd be in real estate at this point. So it was a long time ago. But I was in my 20s buying my first home, and the realtor that was, doing whatever, again, I had to trust them because they were the professional. I didn't go around researching or interviewing realtors, which I think you should do. And by the way, and the guy was great, but there were a lot of things we didn't know. He said, this is what you got to do. We talked to the lender. Lender said, this is what you got to do. And all we're doing is following, them. But I was so nervous about getting pre-approved because of the judgment. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want them to reject me or them to tell me my credit score is not, high enough. And I just remember that feeling of, man, I'm like, someone's going to reject me. And I didn't even put that into place. It was just like, do we have to do this? Should I just keep renting, right? Because would I rather rent than going through this rejection? And obviously we got over that, but I remember that just being a big piece where it's like, these people are going to look at me and be like, oh, you don't have good credit, and you are seeing that person at the table. So you have that. But as we were doing it, they're telling us how much money we need, things like that. And I remember not having enough. Like, they told us how much money to have, but we didn't have enough. And we legitimately had to borrow money off of my brother, who was 18 years old at the time, because they told us we needed another $3,000. And technically, you couldn't just go get it from Joe Schmo. It had to be from family. So we actually needed an extra $3,000. And then all of a sudden, as we're buying the house, we're doing everything, we go to closing. And 2 days before we go to closing, we get the closing statement. And the closing statement is for another $5,000 more than what we already had. And I knew the attorney. He was a good friend for a long time, and I was lucky to have him. But I actually called him. I said, I don't know where these numbers came from, but I don't have this money. So how am I closing? And he goes, oh, no, those are overestimates. You'll be fine. The money you have is fine. And I'm like, how would anybody else know that? How would for someone else, I'd be like, we're screwed, and yet it was crazy because when we went to the closing table, the numbers were $5,000 less where we were able to buy the house. But again, it's just a part of the nerve. So it's like, first time home buyer, you don't know what you're doing. You're trusting everybody. And then you're getting kind of like these things like, oh no, you need this. Oh no, you need this now. And we kind of felt like, you're like, man, are you looking for, my blood type too? And, my criminal record? Like, what else are you going to ask for at this point? And it was just a lot. And I do remember that. So when I'm hosting my first time home buyers events, I always think about those moments because it's like, I know that you're scared. I know that you're stressed out about this. I know that this is a commitment and it's a lot. And I even make jokes. I'm like, I get it. I said, you know what? I don't like commitment either. I got married. I bought a house, and that's probably the only commitment that I'll ever have in my life because I don't want to commit to anything else. If you tell me, hey, this is a year contract, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. So anyway, so that's probably one of my best memories about real estate when it comes to me actually being in the process.
Yeah. When it comes to networking, what are some strategies or things you do to network well?
Well, I think it's when you go in a room of people that you don't know, you usually want to find the person who's hosting it first, because the person who's hosting it usually knows everybody. So when you're introducing yourself to that person, you're just like, yeah, this is my first time. Don't really know anybody. And they'll be like, you know what? Let me introduce you to some people. Most of the time, even I'll do the introductions and introduce people to other people. You don't want to be the person in the corner, because outside of the fact where we know you're uncomfortable, you also look awkward. So people notice about the person in the corner, but they usually won't go find the person in the corner. Have you experienced that? Yeah.
I'm the one in the corner.
Very rarely. I mean, unless you're the host, you usually aren't going to talk to the person in the corner. And the reason it is because you got 10, 20 people there in the same area, and you got one person asking you a whole bunch of questions, right? A whole bunch of different people. So you can't ever get to that corner. There's some times where there's some really good food in a networking event, and I can't get to it because I have too many people around me to where I can't get to the food. This just happened to me 2 weeks ago.
So maybe standing by the food
is a good idea.
Good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, just stand by the table so you have it. But the other part too is think about how you're eating and networking at the same time, because then you're putting your food in your mouth. Unless you can be quiet.
No, I meant you're standing there so people
can't
to you.
I know, but then you're still eating too. You know.
Yeah.
But to your point, yes. So one of his suggestions is if you are uncomfortable, just stand by the food, because then people will absolutely talk to you. But no, I think those are two key pieces. The other part too is have a strategy of what you're doing. A lot of people get nervous about what do I say, this and that. And sometimes just there's a whole bunch of stuff, by the way, AI has it. Even you use Claude or ChatGPT on, what are really cool questions to ask people in networking, because you just don't want to go down the generics, because people don't remember the people that ask generic questions. And then I think the other part of networking, which I just taught this last week, was if you're going to network and you're going to take someone's business card and you say, hey, I'll call you, call them. Because I'm going to say about 95% of the time, people don't call. And that's what keeps you apart. That's what stands you apart in business, is that you are the person, if you take someone's card and you say, I'm going to call you, regardless of how you feel afterwards, you make the phone call. I don't care if it's that day. I don't care if it's the next day. I don't care if it's 3 days later. You call because that shows the trust and that shows the value that you bring to the business.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely need to improve on the networking side.
Mm-hmm. Don't we all?
When it comes to marketing strategies, like what are your strategies? Like, what do you do for marketing?
I don't think I do any of it very well. Social media, you got to know your demographic, and it seems like a lot of the different demographics out there for people are in different social environments. But, again, you have to be real. I think there's a lot of people out there that are putting on videos and doing all this crazy stuff to just get the followers. But if you don't come off as genuine, I suggest don't do it. If you can't come across, by the way, you can look stupid. I probably do half the time on my videos, maybe even 85% of the time. But I think you got to come across genuine in your videos. I think the other part too is marketing, is making sure that you're not sitting behind the screen. So what I've noticed too is that if your business is really a referral-based business, you should be limiting your time at your desk. And that is a struggle for me, because there are definitely days, and Mondays are probably a big one, to where I'm probably about 5-6 hours behind my desk just doing work. And yet at the same time, I really need to be out meeting people, and just because I'm business to consumer. So, and if you talk to other people that are out there just being people because they like to be out and about, those are the best people to hang out with. I went to the Y, but I happen to know that the pickleball, I don't know if you've heard about pickleball. Mm-hmm. Pickleball is everywhere, and a lot of people are playing. The Ys have pickleball. You have Rally you got the rec centers. And if you can get out there and just be in front of those people that are playing pickleball, because it's all demographics of people, you're starting to meet people. Because what you have to do is you have to expand your database. So the whole point of marketing, in case you guys don't know, is to expand your reach and expand your database. there's definitely a lead gen besides marketing, and people confuse that. They think it's the same thing, and it's not. You got to market and brand yourself. And when you're marketing and branding yourself, it's got to be somebody that people know. So if I'm putting something out on social media, it's not going to be like Joe Schmo from Idaho is going to see me. It's probably likely someone I've ran into. It's someone that I met at an event, a party, maybe a networking event, that somebody's going to be like, oh, I really want to follow her. I like her energy. I want to follow her. And, you know, and a lot of times we also like people that have the same common denominator, which a lot of times we don't really talk too much about. But, you know, there's a lot of people from Charlotte that are from Rochester, New York. And so the minute you say Rochester, New York, or you say Wegmans, everybody, you know, has an opinion, and we're getting one in 2025. And it is one of those things where it's like, oh, I like this person. They're from Rochester. I mean, in Rochester, they might not like me. They probably weren't even my friend in Rochester, right? But now that I'm here, they're like, oh, yeah, we're from Rochester, too. And so it's, you know, it's a common denominator. If you've got kids that are 5 years old and someone else is in that same room that's got kids of 5 years old, you're likely to find each other. Have you ever noticed, and there's a psychology behind it, but the minute that you have a Lexus, everybody has a Lexus, you're like, oh my gosh, everybody's copying me. But it's just kind of the nature of marketing, is that people who are very similar to you are likely to find you based on good marketing, branding, and being real.
Yeah. When it comes to negotiating for your customers, clients, what are some tactics that are good? What are some tactics that are not good?
I have a lot of negotiation skills. I use everything and anything I can normally in negotiations, and it's usually just to try to make sure that my client is winning as well. Sometimes, depending on the market, clients aren't winning. You know, if it's a seller's market, the buyers, you know, they're paying a lot of things, they're not getting repairs, you know, things like that. So you got to find winning strategies. Most of the people have even heard about the fact that you're like, oh yeah, this person gave this person an extra $100,000 and still lost the house. Like, you'll hear those things, but the fact is that there's other ways to do it. More money isn't always the best scenario for people. I know it sounds crazy, but it's not. A lot of times when I'm looking at my client's position when it comes against other offers, and they're saying, yep, there's multiple offers, you know, the question is that what's the seller's motivation? You know, does the client want to get out fast? Do they want to live in the house for an extra month? And just even recently, I had a client who wanted to give these people a lot more money than I wanted to give them. And I said, listen, I've talked to their agent. They really just want an extra month to live. And the guy goes, for free? I'm like, yeah, free. Because that, let's just say it's $4,000, literally saved you $40,000 in, you know, in extra money that you're paying this person for the purchase of the house, right? So sometimes it's just understanding the different parts of the puzzle, because it's all not cut and dry. Real estate is very gray. There is a lot of gray in real estate, and there's a lot of winning strategies. Sometimes covering small costs might sound like a lot to a person, because when the buyer, you know, you were a buyer and you put, let's say, $20,000 down, and all of a sudden you tell the seller, hey, I'm going to cover your closing costs. That sounds like a lot, right? Well, it's really not if you're not paying the commissions, because it's probably only $1,500. But to them, they remember it being a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So again, there's some really good negotiation tools that are out there, but you have to be open to circling the box, asking the right questions. And a lot of people don't like conflict, so they think negotiations is conflict, but it's just winning the best deal for your client that makes a win-win for everybody. I'm not saying, you know, take the other person over, you know, over the other person, or, you know, or taking advantage of somebody. You just got to understand what is a winning combination for both parties. And I've used those strategies to win houses for my clients with just $1,500. Mm-hmm. So we haven't had to pay, you know, $40,000 or $50,000 over asking on some of these things, because we just learned about the client, understood what they wanted, and met their needs.
Mm-hmm. Share a little bit about your company, like what services you offer, mm-hmm. where do you do, like what's your reach or area, mm-hmm. and anything else you want to share about your company.
Sure. So being in real estate, in 2017, I incorporated. I'm technically a broker in charge in North Carolina. Fender Homes Incorporated is my company's name. I do work with North Group, Scott Wilkinson, which he's done great for what I'm doing. The things that I do, we stage homes. So it's kind of interesting because some people will say, okay, well, I'm just hiring this listing agent over this listing agent. And the seller doesn't ask the questions and say, okay, what's the value proposition? For my houses, I'll use mixed media for staging homes, which kind of means that I'll bring in some things, use the stuff that's had to make sure that we have the best pictures. I have a staging certification so that I understand where the pictures need to be. I make sure we have the best pictures out there. We make sure that we are looking at all the comps. We look at the motivation of why my client is selling to understand why we price houses. So we actually use some pricing models to help with that. And obviously, most people know that I'm out there and I do coach other realtors. I do some business coaching with AI and business and disc profile. I do some coaching as well with that. And I have bought Airbnbs. I do invest in real estate. And I think as a full picture as a realtor, when you're talking about like being in business, you really have to have a lot of eggs in different baskets based on you don't know where the trends are going to go or lie to know if does the stock market do well? Does the stock market not do well? Does your retirement account doing that well? Does this rental do well? So you have to kind of diversify a lot of the different things you're doing. But my financial advisors do understand that real estate is a part of what I do. I do sell in North and South Carolina. I literally do sell all the way through the 7 different counties here in Charlotte and also into South Carolina, all the way down to York County. I do have a lot of business partners throughout the United States. So if you have questions or you want to move to one of those states, I have a lot of really good realtor friends that I've partnered with and had to help people transfer. I do a lot of relocation business for people. I help them with the movers. A lot of times when we're talking about the listings of homes and things like that, I am a full service. So whether it comes down to needing a handyman, electrician, you want to fix your screen porch or enclosed porch, things like that, I make sure that we handle it. Whether it comes to cleaning of homes, things like that. So there's not anything that you're doing on your own when you're hiring me, regardless of being a buyer's agent or selling your home. I'm going to make sure that we're helping you with all the decisions you're making.
Okay. And how can people reach you?
So you guys can reach me at my cell phone number of 704-750-8140. My website, if you want to check me out before you call me, is fenderhomes.com. If you go into Google and anything like that with Fender Homes, you should find me right away.
And one more question. What does the world need more of today?
Peace. We need collaboration, love, and peace for sure. Yeah.
Well, Pam, thank you. This was great. I learned
Thanks for having me.
A few things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you for sharing your story and a little bit about the real estate market and being a realtor.
Yeah, a whole hour about me talking about me. I'm like, I don't know how I don't love life right now.
That's good. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, guys.